Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. Today, we are on a very specific mission. We're dissecting a transcript that presents itself not as a sermon, not as a lecture, but as a direct first-person monologue.
From the creator to the created.
Exactly. It's a text that blends this profound emotional comfort with some really strict demands for loyalty. It offers what it calls a supernatural remedy.
For anxiety, debt, despair, all the big ones.
It's intense, it's personal, and it claims to have the power to rewrite your reality from the inside out.
It really is a fascinating piece of rhetoric to break down. We're looking at a viral-style transcript titled God Message, I'm With You.
Right.
And what makes it stand out immediately is the perspective. Usually, religious texts are about God or they're people talking to God.
Pleading for help, yeah.
This one attempts to be the voice of God. It frames the theology around this personal interventionist deity who claims to know the listener's internal state, their insomnia, their financial panic,
Their loneliness.
better than they know it themselves.
It's a bold move, right? To write in the first person as the Almighty.
A very bold move.
And whatever your background, believer or skeptic, the way this message is constructed is just, it's incredibly powerful.
It really is.
It hits buttons you might not even know you had, which, actually, before we dive into the mechanics of this divine monologue, I have one quick request.
Sure.
If you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button. It really, really helps us keep these deep dives coming.
Please do.
So, with that said, where do we start?
Well, let's set the stage here. We aren't here to validate the supernatural claims or to, debunk them as theologians.
Yeah.
We are here to analyze the rhetorical structure.
Yeah.
How does this message construct the idea of God? And maybe more importantly, what does it assume about the person on the other end?
The listener.
Right.
Every text has an ideal reader in mind.
Exactly.
So we have to look at this almost like literary detectives. We have to start with the character of the speaker. Section 1 of our breakdown, the portrait of the divine. When you read this, this isn't the distant clockmaker God who set the universe in motion and just walked away, is it?
Oh, far from it. That clockmaker concept, that's deism, right? The idea of a God who builds the machine and then lets it run.
Right.
This text is the polar opposite. This is a God construct defined by extreme intimacy, almost startlingly close.
How so?
It opens with, "My beloved child, I speak to you from the depths of my heart."
Immediate proximity.
Right. It's paternal, but it's also deeply emotional.
That's what jumped out at me. You usually think of a deity as, I don't know, stoic, unmovable, maybe a bit scary.
Sure.
But there's a line where the speaker says, "Your heart misses me." And later it says, "God takes delight in the listener's spirit."
Yes. It feels like this God is emotionally invested in the relationship.
To the point of vulnerability, almost. Why make God sound vulnerable? Isn't God supposed to be all-powerful?
There's a crucial rhetorical shift. Traditional theology often presents God as self-sufficient, totally complete without humanity. But this text presents a God who craves the relationship. There's that line, "I know you as well as I know the sky, just as I call each star by its name."
It's trying to bridge that gap between being all-powerful, knowing the stars, and being intimate.
Precisely. Knowing your specific pain. If God needs you, then you matter. It instantly confers value on the listener, which is a powerful hook for someone feeling worthless.
And there's some very visceral imagery it uses to describe God's empathy. It doesn't just say, "I know you're sad."
No, it's much more intense.
It says, "I know what it feels like for those you trusted to abandon you. Tears your back with the whips of compassionless." That's heavy imagery.
It is heavy. And it's referencing the passion narrative, the suffering of Jesus, but look at how it's used.
How?
It's weaponizing that theological history to build immediate rapport. It's saying, "I'm not just watching you suffer from a golden throne. I have suffered like you."
It's the difference between a boss telling you to get back to work and a friend sitting on the curb with you saying, "Yeah, this sucks."
Precisely. And that curb-sitting dynamic is essential for the rest of the message to work. If the speaker is a judge, you get defensive.
But if the speaker is a fellow sufferer who happens to be all-powerful,
You listen. You trust them because they get it.
which brings us to the other side of the equation. If that's the God, who is the human?
Section 2. Diagnosing the human condition.
Because this text makes some very specific assumptions about who is listening, right?
It's a classic cold reading technique, but performed with high empathy. For those who don't know, cold reading is what psychics do, making high probability guesses that feel personal.
And the listener profile here is very specific. This isn't for someone who is having a great week.
No, not at all. Just got a promotion and sleeping like a baby. This isn't for them.
Definitely not. The text assumes the listener is broken. It mentions tears dampened your pillow and tossing and turning. Insomnia comes up multiple times.
And insomnia is a state of vulnerability. When you can't sleep, your defenses are down, your anxiety is spiraling, you feel incredibly lonely.
So by targeting insomnia,
The voice claims access to the listener's most private, unguarded moments. It's a powerful validation. It tells the listener, I am watching you when no one else is.
that's comforting, but also a little bit surveillance state, if you think about it too hard.
True.
But let's look at the specific worldly struggles. It talks about accumulating debt, family matters, betrayal by false friends.
It's painting a portrait of someone who feels besieged. It does. It feels like modern life. It moves from emotional pain to systemic stress.
It acknowledges the listener is under attack.
And I found the description of the listener's past particularly interesting. It says, when you were a child, your eyes were curious, but lies and betrayals later annihilated your hope.
Annihilated, such a strong word.
It is. It validates the listener's cynicism. That's the hook. It doesn't start by scolding them for lacking faith.
No, it starts by acknowledging their trauma.
It frames the listener not as a sinner who needs punishment, but as a victim. There's a line calling the listener a sharp spearhead that cuts through the winds.
So it's saying, you aren't weak, you've just been damaged by a cruel world.
Exactly. It removes the burden of guilt. It creates a safe harbor feeling. The world hurt you, but I am here to heal you.
Which sets up the solution. You're in pain, I get it, now I'm here to fix it. But, and here's where it gets really interesting, it's not a free fix.
No, it's not a charity.
Section 3, the transaction.
Right. This is where the theology becomes transactional. The comfort is the opening offer, but there are strict requirements for the payoff.
And step 1 seems to be total surrender. The text says, give me your heart completely and sincerely. It warns against doing it only partially.
That partially warning is the fail-safe mechanism.
How do you mean?
It says, if you offer your heart only partially, your life will be tossed about by the waves. Psychologically, this is brilliant. It's a sealed loop.
If the listener tries it and doesn't feel better.
The text has already explained why.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't surrender completely enough.
So if it works, the message is true. If it doesn't work, you did it wrong. That's convenient.
It is convenient. But it's also standard for high-commitment belief systems. It protects the authority of the voice.
Okay, so then there's the gratitude aspect. But it's not just be thankful.
No, it's almost a cognitive behavioral therapy exercise. It says, compile a list of blessings.
And here's the kicker. Give thanks for your ability to give thanks. That feels meta.
It is a metacognitive instruction. It's trying to shift the listener's focus from their mountain of problems to their internal state of gratitude.
We know from psychology that you can't really hold anxiety and gratitude at the same time.
They use different neural pathways. By forcing the focus on gratitude, even just for the ability to be grateful, you physically change the brain's neurochemistry.
So it's a hack. It's a biohack wrapped in theology.
In a sense, yes. It breaks the loop of negative thinking.
And we can't forget step 3 of this transaction, evangelism.
Right. Share these words with others to help those on the edge of despair.
So it's a viral mechanic.
That, and it turns the victim into a savior. If you're saving others, you aren't the one needing saving anymore. It gives them purpose.
It's a hierarchy shift. You go from the person crying into a pillow to the one holding the flashlight. But what's promised in return?
Well, this is where it moves beyond inner peace. Section 4, the promise of supernatural intervention.
This part blew my mind. The text promises God will get involved in the legal and financial systems.
It moves out of the abstract and into the concrete. It says, I will touch the hearts of people, judges, authorities, so they regard you with favor.
Judges. It implies the listener might be in court.
That is incredibly specific. It suggests the listener feels powerless against systemic forces, debt collectors, legal proceedings, authorities.
It sounds like someone who is in real trouble.
It appeals to people who feel the system has failed them. If you're drowning in debt, logically, you might lose.
The worldly rules are against you.
But this text promises that spiritual alignment will override social and legal obstacles. Your mountain of problems will crumble.
It's a power fantasy, isn't it? The idea that you have a secret back channel to the ultimate authority who can overrule the judge or the bank.
In a way, yes. It turns the listener from a defendant into a protected witness. It uses vivid imagery of breaking chains and providing new maps and correct routes.
It's a seductive promise if you're staring at a pile of bills.
Very. But to get that, you have to win the battle inside your head first.
Which leads us to Section 5, the battle against feelings. The text seems to have a beef with human emotion.
Which is ironic, considering how emotional the opening was. But it sets up a strict dichotomy. On one side is truth, the voice of God.
And on the other side is feelings, which are portrayed as deceptive.
The text explicitly says the greatest battle is against your own emotions, which sometimes lead you to think things that are not true.
It tells the listener to cover your ears to the voices of the enemy, and the enemy is your own anxiety.
Your own logic, your fears, your depressive thoughts. Yes, this is the epistemology of faith, how we know what we know.
So the text is arguing that your brain is a liar.
It is. It says, foolish words can destroy innocent lives. It encourages a form of dissociation from one's own negative emotions.
Instead of engaging with anxiety, you're told to look at yourself in the mirror and speak defiance to it.
It's like an affirmation. It calls for a river of clean thoughts to replace the confusion. It's essentially saying, don't trust your gut if your gut tells you you're doomed.
Trust this external voice instead.
Which, for someone with crippling anxiety or depression, can be therapeutic. Their internal voice is often lying to them.
But it's a double-edged sword, right?
Absolutely. On one hand, it helps you ignore the voice of depression. On the other, it requires a total suspension of critical judgment.
If logic is the enemy, then you can't logically question the message.
Right. You have to shut off the critical part of your brain. Your own doubts become attacks rather than valid questions.
It's demanding you swap your reality for the one the text provides.
Correct. And that reality is one where you are a winner, which leads to where this all ends. The end game.
Section 6, the vision of the future.
The text paints a picture of what life looks like after this transaction is complete. And it involves a lot of secrecy.
That stood out to me. It advises the listener to keep your plan secret and do not reveal our intentions.
It creates a conspiracy of two, the listener and God, against a world of envious and indiscreet individuals.
Why does secrecy?
Secrecy builds intimacy, an in-group dynamic. It also isolates the listener from potential critics. If you don't tell your skeptical friends about your supernatural victory plan...
They can't talk you out of it. It's a protective bubble.
Exactly. It safeguards the new belief system. It says, they will mock you. They are headed for defeat. It's very us versus them.
It reframes mockery not as valid criticism, but as evidence that the other people are wrong.
And it promises that a right person's coming soon to help. It's the construct of destiny. The text assures the listener, I'm never late. I always arrive on time.
So the current suffering isn't a failure, it's just a waiting period.
Yes. And it tells the listener they are royalty, wearing royal garments.
That's a powerful image for someone in debt. You look like a loser to the world right now, but secretly, you are a king in waiting.
Precisely. It restores dignity. And that secret knowledge is what empowers them to endure.
So let's summarize this journey. We have a message that starts with incredible empathy for a broken, sleepless person.
It validates their pain completely, no judgment.
Then it offers a deal. Surrender your will and your logic 100%. Stop trusting your own brain.
And in exchange, you get peace, you get financial vindication, and you get victory over the judges and enemies in your life.
It's a message that moves from comfort to command to conquest.
It's powerful stuff. Whether you view it as divine revelation or a psychological coping mechanism, you can see why this would go viral.
Absolutely. It answers the fundamental human question. Am I alone in this mess? And the answer it gives is a resounding no.
And not only are you not alone, but the most powerful being in the universe is your personal attorney and therapist.
But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with something to think about. We've talked about surrender, giving up control. This text asks the listener to stop trusting their own emotions and logic, to essentially give up the steering wheel.
We usually think of surrender as weakness.
Right. But does true peace come from surrendering control to a higher power, as described here? Or is this surrender actually a clever psychological trick?
How so?
Well, by admitting you are powerless and handing it over to God, are you actually reclaiming your own agency by externalizing your strength? Is the God in this text actually the listener's own potential, projected outwards so they can finally believe in it? Sometimes we can't believe in ourselves, but we can believe in a God who believes in us.
It's a loop.
It's a loop. So are we talking to God, or are we talking to the strongest, most hopeful part of ourselves that we've been afraid to listen to?
That is a fascinating thought. And maybe, in the end, the result is the same. The anxiety lifts, the focus shifts, and the person finds the strength to face the day.
Whether that comes from above or from within, That's for the listener to decide.
We'll let you decide.
Thanks for listening to Thinking Deeper by 6-7.
Until next time.